Get framed at Main Street Frame in Albia. Now, near the southwest corner of the historic Albia Square. Your memories get framed and can be printed at Main Street Frame. Your pictures could be waiting on your phone or waiting in storage boxes. Bring those memories to life with Main Street Frame. They print on photo paper or canvas. And of course, they have a wide variety of frames to choose from and custom sizes. What else would you like to frame? Get it framed at Main Street Frame. You name it, we can frame it. A completely creative way to honor your life. Main Street Frame in Albia.
Welcome back to Life, Death, and Everything in Between. Today we've got a very important topic, and we're going to be talking about mental health. Brian?
Today we have Dee Dee Chance, a licensed mental health therapist here in Albia. Welcome, Dee Dee.
Thank you.
Give us a little background, Dee Dee.
Well, I grew up in Corden and then went to Simpson College, graduated, went to my graduate program at University of Nebraska at Omaha, and then ended up back in Albia because back then it was hard to find a job without having experience. So started in Ottumwa as a therapist, and I've been a therapist more than 20 years now. So I just recently wrapped up a 10-year career at a mental health center here in Ottumwa and decided to take it full-time private practice, and so I've done that in Albia.
And you've recently just went into a new office, right?
Yes, correct. I have an office up on the square right now. It is part of Monroe Abstract. People enter on the back side in the alley, but then September 1st, I'll be moving over to Sarvers Chiropractic. They are putting me up in part of the old workout facility.
Very
so
nice.
Super excited about that.
Yeah. So this is a very touching, interesting topic. The one thing, at least when I think about mental health, to me, you think it's something that not a lot of people want to talk about, or they may just kind of...
Especially men.
Yep, they might just kind of keep it inside. It seems to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, that people are talking about it more now, but it's something that still definitely needs to be brought out.
I would
in light
agree.
More.
I think really once COVID hit, like it really became more of a hot topic because it became apparent whenever we were in all the lockdown and isolated how many people's mental health declined. We saw a lot of elderly people that, could no longer go to Hardee's for their morning coffee get-togethers, and so we're feeling isolated. We saw a huge influx of like elderly seeking therapy, which I love meeting with the elderly. And so I think ever since that time, it's become more at the forefront. That's when telehealth really erupted. Like we really hadn't used telehealth, like Zoom and that kind of stuff before then. And so it really opened up doors. And so now I feel like, suicide rates have increased. We've seen more hospitalizations, and just the world has gotten a lot more stressful, scarier. And so I feel like states, communities are putting more dollars towards mental health, and it's becoming... continuing to address the stigma. I also think it helps that, you're seeing it more in professional sports. They're being more open about it. There's been some like really good segments on players that have shared about, their suicide attempts, thoughts, hospitalizations, medications, those kinds of things. And so it's been normalizing it more.
And it just seems to me like this, like an episode like this is something that everybody can get something out of, because when it comes to mental health, it almost seems to me like the ones that maybe act like they don't need to talk to anybody, or you don't think have any mental health issues, that they may be the ones that are struggling the most.
Absolutely. Denial is a great thing. And so many times, especially with men, not to pick on you guys, but men see it as weakness to admit, that maybe I'm struggling, I'm overwhelmed, or sometimes people don't even know how to label the emotions. They're just so used to like feeling that unhappiness, the disgruntledness, people cover it up with using substances. Most, often alcohol is one that people will go to kind of just try and they say, oh, it makes it all better. Yep, for the time being it does. But so I think it's just, and I think people when they think of mental health, they think of the crazy schizophrenic on the street corner, like begging for handouts. And every one of us have had a struggle with anxiety, depression. You know, it doesn't mean it lasts forever. And I think that's what some people get really caught up in, is they think that it's a forever label. And, you know, people can have a period of time where it's really rough and like, you know, but they can come out of it and come out on the other side. Medication isn't forever. Treatment isn't forever. It's, you know, I think everybody needs a therapist. So.
Sure.
You know, I'm a little bit older than you guys, but when I was younger, even in high school and college, you never heard nothing about mental health issues. And now you hear a lot about it. So with Zoom, do you feel as though some people feel more comfortable doing it on Zoom than meeting on a one-on-one face-to-face basis?
Yes, I think it takes out that factor of like, you know, people are so busy as it is, and so like sometimes people can do it on their lunch break and they don't have to like leave the office,
right.
Or you know, they can do it after they put their kids to bed, and it just gives them a lot more flexibility. And you know, sometimes people will do a combination. They'll come in, like I have some people that come into the office during this summer because they're off for the summer because they're teachers, and then they'll do Zoom during the school year because it's just too hectic to
right.
you know, drive. And so and in our rural areas, sometimes it's the shortage. It allows you to get seen quicker because you can see somebody out of Iowa City or anywhere in Iowa that, you know, you're able to get in quicker with telehealth sometimes.
So you mentioned Zoom there, Brian. So, you know, that makes it so it's not just local people that you will see. You could, I mean, you can see people nationwide if they'd like to call you. And,
correct.
And
yep.
It's great. And the other thing, you know, you were talking about with the stress and with mental health, one thing I feel like you're seeing more of, because you brought up medication, you're seeing that now that people are even saying like it could be something as simple as your hormones could be off for men and women, and that can be a huge problem with all that.
Yes, absolutely. That can play into it. And that's why we're so good at like dismissing it or think if we work harder, it'll make it go away, when actually, you know, it could be a simple fix of going and seeing your doctor and them running some tests and helping you get going.
And it could be impossible. Sometimes the drugs are doing an adverse effect. There's just so many things to
alcohol
look at.
is a depressant. So.
So just, you know, I was a probation officer, so I had a lot of clients that had mental health issues, and you know, it found it very difficult to get them on board to get the help they needed, because they didn't think they needed the help. But there is help out there, and people need to realize that.
Right. And it's not a quick fix. You know, sometimes people come and they want it to be a quick fix. You know, I always tell people, you didn't get here overnight. I'm not going to get you out of here overnight. And it also takes work on your part, you know, to work at it. And sometimes it's not fun, you know, like we all have our own stories. We all have our own junk. And so, and I think like the older generations, they were just taught so much about like, we just don't talk about it.
Right.
And so, that's really hard for like and then, you know, it just depends on how you're raised. And, so it's kind of opening those lines of communication. I can't tell you how many times people will say things like, oh, I was so nervous about coming here, but I'm so glad that I did. Just having somebody that, you know, listened to me and not making judgments and just getting it out. And it's like, that's like the best part about therapy. It's your own space to do with it what you want.
And knowing it's also confidential too. So
Mm-hmm.
that's very important because we had to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you brought up, you know, like years ago where it was people didn't talk about it as much, and you know, the world was just so much different years ago too, where you know you had much smaller circles, where now with social media it's just like there's just so much things that can go on, from bullying and just misinformation and just it can be brutal at times.
Yes, I think social media can have very negative consequences,
It really
especially with
has.
these teenagers.
For sure.
It really has. You see it all the time, that you can put it on there about somebody at school and the rumor gets going, and you've seen a lot of bad outcomes because of these situations.
Yes.
So how do people go about getting in touch with you?
Well, I am on Facebook, so you can look me up as Dee Dee Chance, LISW. You can reach out to me that way. I also have a phone number of 641-244-4884. So those are the two best ways to get a hold of me. Okay. So you can also message me on my personal messenger on Facebook too. I was hacked a couple months ago, so I will warn you about that. So, yeah.
So we're talking about times are always evolving and that. Do you still pursue more education?
Yes, because there's always new things coming out.
Right.
But I'm unfortunately, I'm becoming more of the seasoned therapist. I'm getting older. And so after doing it for more than 20 years. And so I don't jump on the latest and greatest. Like I kind of sit back because honestly, what a lot of it comes back to is people wanting somebody to listen and talk it through and just,
Right.
you know, being able to bounce ideas off of. But I am trained in like EMDR, which is an eye movement desensitization reprocessing approach. And so, and I have looked into like somatic, because really what they're finding is like so much of like our physical health is also tied in to our mental health, because we store so much of our emotions and that energy. And, you know, I tell my kids that I see is you stuff it all down and then eventually it all comes out,
Right.
whether it's in a good way or a bad way. So, so somatic is really a big one right now where, you know, trying to get people to be more aware of where they're storing it.
So with us starting this podcast and things, we have started to get quite a large following in our funeral industry.
Yeah.
So a lot of our followers are funeral directors and people that work in the funeral industry. And one thing that I've found as I've started digging in this a little bit is mental health is a very big thing in our industry. So this is kind of, we're gonna have a little segment here that's gonna be for all of you funeral directors and everyone that works in the actual industry. And this is a good guest to have for this, because Dee Dee actually grew up in a funeral home. Her parents owned a funeral home. So can you kind of tell us about that growing up?
Sure. My parents owned a funeral home. They had one in Allerton, Iowa, and then Seymour, Iowa. And then when I was in 4th grade, they bought the one in Corden. So it was like in the middle of the two towns. And then Corden started to be the real hub of it. Like my dad was always gone, busy, because that's where the majority of the funerals were. And so when I was in 6th grade, we moved to Corden. So up to that point, I had actually lived in the funeral home. In Seymour, I didn't know any different, because that was always my norm, you know, moving everything in the living room because you knew you had a funeral the next day or visitation, and it happened to be quiet upstairs because there was a visitation downstairs. And so then when we moved to Corden, we lived across the street from it. But yeah, my dad, he retired when I was in a junior year of college, and then yeah, he passed away just a short 18 months after he retired, unfortunately.
Yeah, didn't get much of a retirement.
No, he did not.
Yeah. And actually his work kind of contributed to his death, correct?
Yes, he had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and so then after he got done with that and was in remission, then like 6 months later it came back as leukemia. And so we were told at the time that like the chemo from the non-Hodgkin's can sometimes set you up to then it goes into leukemia, but I'm not sure if that was just always odd to me. But on his death certificate, it said secondary cause was exposure to formaldehyde from the embalming fluid. And you know, you and I have talked, Bob, about how like I remember my dad, like he would take his flannel off, throw it over the chair, and then he would go in and embalm with his Hanes t-shirt and jeans. Like that was just, I mean, there was never any kind of protective wear.
And that was the norm back then. I mean, I've heard stories of some of the old timers that the real old timers before the 80s. I mean, they may not even wear rubber gloves. The rubber gloves didn't even come into effect until, you know, the HIV stuff really started coming along in the 80s. So there was literally people that used zero protection. For
I don't remember ever
time.
seeing him wear gloves.
Wow.
Like,
Yep.
so, yeah.
So do they still use the same type of embalming fluid to this day?
That's a question for Bob.
Some they have changed, you know, but it still, you know, it can cause cancer. So you
Dangerous.
definitely need to.
But
need
don't
to
you
be
wear like a
protected.
suit now?
Yes, 100%. You have PPE equipment that you do wear and take care of yourself. Respirators. Everyone should have a respirator on as they're embalming too, which would stop from you ingesting the fumes. So, but like everything, times have changed and things are definitely better
And
than
they
they would
didn't
have
know.
been.
Like,
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but you know, and with this, so Dee Dee with her working around the funeral home and seeing her parents run the funeral home, she also saw the stress that the funeral home can bring, and it's just kind of got me digging and kind of looking into it more. Which there's some interesting facts I kind of want to throw out there for us funeral directors and people that work in this space. Compassion fatigue, that's a real thing. And when I was looking at that, it got me thinking, and you've said this too, Brian, there's many times that you're not physically doing things that are wearing you out, but if you have a busy day that you're working with families that are grieving and you're working funerals and a visitation, you'll go home that night and you will be absolutely exhausted. And here recently, you just said that, that you see that.
You might not even know the family, but you get caught up with what they're going through, and it is exhausting. I can remember when I first started out, we went to Des Moines to pick a guy up, and the family was there, and they were crying.
Your first time, wasn't it?
Yep, and I got in the van, and I looked at him, I started crying, and I said, I can't do this. And Bob says, no, you're perfect, and it's worked out pretty well, but you get mentally exhausted.
And then the other thing that I was kind of digging into this is secondary PTSD, which I asked Dee Dee about, and then I don't want people to think this is just funeral directors, because there's a lot of people, like, we're not just one profession going through this; it's many professions. But like with this, it says it touches any mental health professionals, medical personnel, nurses, ER doctors, first responders, police, EMTs, firefighters, social workers, and family members of trauma survivors. Here locally, we just had a situation happen on our town square with a big fire. That this is secondary PTSD. Sure seems like it's something that would absolutely be part of that.
Yes.
And then you say there's another name for that also?
Yeah, secondary stress.
Okay.
Yep, secondary traumatic stress. Sorry.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and that all comes back to, even though you're not experiencing it firsthand, I mean, there were so many people out there watching it on the square, and, watching the buildings come down and watching the firefighters risk their lives, and, also the good things of the community coming together. But I mean, it was very stressful, and just people's livelihoods being destroyed and people losing everything they owned. And, then we as helpers taking that on is like, how can we fix this? How can we help? And that's why, in the helping professions, it's so important to pay attention to our compassion fatigue and our vicarious trauma, because, we're hearing the stories, we're going through it with them. We may not have been there when it happened, but, they're reliving it when they tell it to us. And that just it's draining. I mean, you're absolutely right. I have said a lot, like, I mean, I have a physical taxing job, but sometimes I go home and my mind is just fried.
Like that.
I need to just sit and veg out. And so it's just so important to, really keep in tune with it. Like, because we're all busy. We all can dismiss it, but eventually it catches up with us,
Sure.
physically, mentally,
And that's when the burnout would come.
Yes. Yep. That's whenever you're just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I think like debriefings are really important for these traumatic events that happen, like to get a chance to get people together and kind of, share their stories, share, what worked well, what, support one another in that, because it's really easy to dismiss it and say, oh, I'm fine. It's just what we do. It's, but you take it all home with you.
And that's the problem, is so many people say that. And in our profession, that's what we're seeing, is the burnout rate has just gotten crazy. So, I mean, there's just people not staying in the business. And when I was just looking at this, like, divorce rate for funeral directors is, I mean, divorce rate, any period, is sky high, but it's even way worse for funeral directors. Yeah. And then the suicide rate, I was looking, like, it's double the national average. So that's a big problem if you're, So if you're a funeral director, and if it'd be no different than me, because I'm the same way, as I just never thought I would want to go sit down and talk to somebody. But Dee Dee is somebody that gets it. She's been around it. So she would love to talk to you. She would do Zoom calls. And this goes for families too. If you are meeting with families in the funeral home, and you can see that they maybe need some help, she would be happy to do a Zoom call with anyone across the country.
I may be getting a hold of you, Dee Dee. I've been experiencing some bullying in the workplace, so I may be talking to you.
I think I could probably help you out there.
He's paying out of pocket for that too, by the way.
I think, back to the days where, I mean, our whole lives were dictated by the funeral home. And, I remember one time I had to somebody was talking about it, you know, about how busy, and I'm like, well, people don't just die 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, like, you know. And it was just like an aha of like, oh, it's like, yeah, like, you know, we've canceled vacations because somebody's passed away, or, you know, like you didn't really do the whole like people cover for each other. So it's like, it's a very physically, mentally taxing, you know. There's lots of family dynamics now that, you know, come into it, I'm sure. So
You said some key points there. Like, for one, like, there's parts of like when your dad would have worked and before that I can't even imagine how they did it. Because there was a time that when, like, my mentor, it was before there was even cell phones and stuff.
Yes.
So they couldn't.
He didn't have cell phones.
You couldn't leave your house. You know, that somebody had to know where you were at all the time, which I just can't even imagine that in today's world.
We had pagers, or we had like, I remember I couldn't answer the phone till I was like in 5th grade, because they didn't trust me to make sure and get all the pertinent information, you know, who called, where. And so, but yeah, you always had to have somebody answering the phone. Sometimes they had phone services, but then you had to make sure you were within so close so that you could go get the pickup.
Yep. Now, on the other side of that, you know, from what I've seen, and I'm sure people in the industry would mostly agree here, is I've been doing this for 20 years. And from when I first started till now, things are tougher as far as some families are much more difficult in today's world.
Oh, I would agree, yes.
Than it used to be. And that's where I feel like we're getting a lot of added stress in our profession, which is definitely contributing to that burnout, which is just another reason why there is a time that you need to talk to somebody to help get you through that stuff. So.
Yeah, and like, I mean, kind of like what you said, Brian, like when I was in school, like I never heard the word mental health or even suicide, you know. And so it's just, it wasn't until I was in college that I learned about the first person that I knew that had completed suicide. And so it's just, unfortunately, becoming more and more common, and something that we need to not shy away from, but instead embrace the conversations and have them, so that, you know, people are informed and they know there's help out there, and it's nothing to be ashamed of.
That's the most important thing. There is help out there, and they got to realize that.
Is there anything else you want to touch base on that you can think of before we go?
No, I just think that you're never too old to get therapy. And it's not always about just rehashing, you know. People say, I don't want to just rehash my childhood. It's really, therapy is what you make it. It's what you want to talk about, you know. It's what you want to work on. Sometimes it's about just career, life goals, you know. I want to be a better parent. I want to be a better spouse. It's really just taking time for you. It's a form of self-care, making it, you know, your dedicated time. So I really encourage people to, you know, seek help. There's help out there, and now in the day and age with telehealth and Zoom and all that, there's no excuse not to, because there's people out there, there's people available.
Right. And one more time, just share again how people can get a hold of you.
You can call me at 641-244-4884, or you can find me on Facebook at Dee Dee Chance, LISW.
Perfect. And folks, you can find us on YouTube, Senate Funeral Home, TikTok. What else we got?
Facebook.
Apple Podcast and Spotify.
And remember, life is short, death is certain, everything in between is worth talking about.
And we'll see you next time.